activity. It's over 11% of all user sessions. It can be preparation to different fraud scheme execution. And you can see that geolocation spoofing activity is extremely high. And that happens because fraudsters often use a VPN, proxy, alter networks to hide their real location. But even though total phishing on this slide and remote access tools bars is quite low compared to others, I would like to focus on them as they keep developing from technological point of view, and phishing widely used in different fraud schemes as the entry point, and it's particularly challenging for detection. And remote access tool, it's kind of supporting tools for phishing attacks and help making them more efficient.
Exactly. Absolutely. And if we actually talk about how the fraudsters uses different technologies and tools basically to perform and execute these fraudulent patterns, we always should consider that the fraud right now evolved as the fraud as a business model, basically. So there are the malware developers that are selling their tools or malwares pieces in the dark web, for example. They might be selling the phishing kits, even they can organize the scam call centers, basically, and we will talk about that a bit later as well. But just imagine that basically any script kiddo, for example, can go to the dark web portal or dark web basically forum, and then obtain the tools to execute these phishing schemes, right? So basically the phishing usually tackled by the threat intelligence solutions, but it will only show you whether somebody is trying to create the phishing that looks like your site or internet banking page. But actually, it's really important to track whether the customer is coming from these phishing sites to your own services, basically. So what do we have from the statistics regarding these cases, Dmitry?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Let's have a look on the graph. It shows the trend how victims visited phishing site. It means that they really was transferred to the original portal from the phishing website, and you can see this activity reached peak over 3,000 visits per week in April. And traditionally, finance is the most affected industry, having over 50% of all activity. And I would like to mention that fraudsters keep working on with other sectors such as industrial, healthcare, transport, sport. Yeah, thank you, Julian. Let's have a look on financial industry trend.
No, sorry, I went ahead of you there.
Here you can see examples of such phishing pages. I would like to point one interesting detail, that most of the phishing pages, they focus on mobile user, and these fake pages are very similar and targeting mobile token application, as the mobile became more essential tool for our everyday life, and most banks, financial organizations, they require second factor authentication, SMS codes, and it's common approach for confirmation any transaction for financial institution.
Yeah, so it makes more sense for them to run this scam on a mobile application or mobile devices from the start, right? Because then if they have the right tool, they might be able to intercept those. Is that why we see that change?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so you mentioned the financial industry, and I was a little bit ahead of you earlier, but obviously other industry are also being targeted, right?
Yeah. Here we can see examples of different industries, and fraudsters use such kind of phishing websites or fake pages to execute different fraud schemes. It can be investment fraud schemes when victims get a cold call from a fake broker pretending to offer them to invest in a variety of schemes or products. They either worthless or even don't exist. Some websites even have a personal account on the website, and victim can see how a fake money works. It also can be anniversary giveaway. They trick victims to submit their personal details by asking to take part in survey or questionnaire. And these credentials will be used in next activities. It also can be a fake goods pages of e-com portals offering the best deals. These websites use low prices to lure shoppers to quickly sell fake or non-existing items.
Yeah, so that's when you ordered something and it never shows up, right?
Yep.
So instead of blaming the delivery van, I should be blaming the fraudster. Okay. So what kind of scale are we talking about when we see those attacks? Like, what's the potential? Actually, let's ask. Let me ask that. So these threat actors, how efficient can they be? How big is the scale of this for them?
Exactly. So the good question, because you might think that the one scammer basically will create one site targeting one bank, and then it will be it, right? But actually it's not. So as you can see here, the 500 websites, the phishing websites, were created by the same threat actor. So, and basically looking at him, you can see how and which tools he was using, basically. And you can understand that how easy it is for them to create such pages. So these pages might be different from, let's say, the functionality point of view. So for some of them, it might create just lookalike service, for example, or let's say the phishing page that looks like your 3DS page. But actually, even if they exfiltrated the personal data of the customer, such as on the right-hand screen, basically. So it's sometimes not enough, because some of the users have the MFA, for example, so multi-factor authentication solutions, or some banks actually enforce the SMS OTP codes. But actually, the fraudsters came above that. So they have the functionality even to have a live chat with the victim, for example. They might be already infected their devices with the malware, for example, which is an additional factor, and so on. But so as you can see, basically, the fraudsters and the developers of such tools are getting much above the traditional, let's say, measures or traditional ways to get this data from. So we could say that actually the phishing tools, phishing kits, basically differ from the functionality point of view. And based on how many or how much money you will give them, it will depend on the functionality you will get. Whether it will have the live chat, maybe it will have the additional the Trojan that will be provided as a bundle to intercept the SMS OTPs. So basically, the question is, how much will you pay for that? So
here's the question. If we can run the next poll, which is, how much does it cost to run this? Because you just explained that it's not very technical. Certainly I could get around to do that. So here's the question: how much do those tools are costing? So we have a 200 euros, 2,000 euros, 20,000 euros. Yes, and knowing that this can generate multi-million. I think there was an example in Asia quite recently, a few months ago, when a fairly simple scam racked about 13.2 or 30.7 million Singapore dollars in 7 days. So it's interesting to see what the audience will think about that. So let's see if we can see the result of the poll. Oh, here we go. So 90% of the audience think it will cost 2,000 euros and 20% about 200 euros to run this scam. Okay, and so let's close the pool. And Andrew, tell us.
Yeah, so basically, as you can see, the fraud is a business evolving like with a huge steps, and the more demand is on the market, the less the prices will be. So as you can see here, the monthly subscription for the fraud as a service, basically with the full-time support as you have like in your banking application, for example, with the domain hosting features, basically can be provided just for the 100 euros for the first time. So just having this kind of basics, any script kiddo can just use this phishing kit to create the legitimately looking page, basically, and start advertising it through the legitimate sources, the Google ads, for example, or any other ads that are working locally within the region. So as you can see, the different pages have different price for that. So you can buy the subscription-based solution. You can also buy the source code for just slightly above the total price, let's say. And so then tweak this code for your own needs and goods, basically. So, but yeah, Julian, don't look at the prices because yeah, I don't want you working the side jobs, basically. So we still need you here. Yeah. So.
I had one question for you because, you know, although we obviously prepared for this a bit earlier, but when I see the monthly subscription, does it mean that they're hosting for them, they're taking care of hosting the phishing site and so on? It's all a truly fraud as a service then?
Exactly, absolutely. And that's what's actually triggering me just looking at it, you know. So the fraud basically evolves as a business. They have their own call centers, the services, the infrastructure set up, their own DevOpses. And basically, this is the trend that we see right now, right? And it will still evolve, and we will see much more examples of such activities around the world.
They must have a high confidence that nobody is going to look too closely at the data to do that. That's staggering. Okay,
Exactly.
so now we talked about the phishing activity, how it works, how much does it cost, how difficult it is to put in place. So how about mitigation? So Dima, what can you tell us about mitigation techniques?
Yeah, the main question, how we can prevent or mitigate such kind of attacks. But the short answer, we can. And the few countermeasures can be applicable to stop or limit fraud caused by these threat actors. Here you can see an example of phishing page, and it can be detected if a company has a capable phishing engine that can identify phishing tool or patterns or artifacts created by threat actors. You can see on the left corner an example of this page that was copied by specific tool. And if you have this kind of phishing detection engine, it can detect that the original page of the company was copied by specific tools and set an alert that something happening and it's preparation for a phishing attack. It can be also used device identification in order to define access to user account from non-typical or well-known fraudulent device. You can see this example with VPN usage and access to the user account from well-known fraudulent device is highlighted by red. And also continuous monitoring to user accounts from suspicious environments such as virtual machine, device simulation, hosting services. Here an example in the middle, because fraudsters, they quite often test the solution before the execution of phishing.
That's a very important point, isn't it? I think often people think of, oh, I'm worried about installing some fraud protection systems because it might impede the customer experience, the customer journey, and so on. But in reality, as you can see here, there's quite a few factors that get measured before the user gets shut down. So it's not that because one thing was detected that automatically the session would be terminated. It's just a continuous monitoring to rate the security level of that session, and you can potentially only take action when you see a dangerous operation being done or transfer of money, change of data, and so on. So it's quite flexible with that setting.
Yep.
So Dima, the other point we wanted to talk about is obviously banking Trojan. There's a lot of noise about them. What can you tell us?
Also phishing kits or phishing pages that can be used scammers to trick users for installation of malicious application. And we also see these trends during the recent months. And on this slide, you can see an example of such phishing site for a European bank. The site has information that victim has to install a fake application for additional authentication in order to continue using the bank services. And this kind of applications is mainly engineered to harvest bank login credential through using lookalike pages and facilitate user account takeover attacks. This application incorporates a keylogger module to capture keystroke and ability. They usually have ability to intercept SMS messages received on an infected device, and one-time password, second-factor codes sent by the bank.
Yeah, this is quite frequent. Like I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a new banking Trojan that got on the market called Malibot, and really this was filling a gap left by botnet, I think. And when you look at the capabilities of those malware, if you take a look on the left-hand side here, there is quite a lot of fairly scary capabilities there. But as you mentioned, stealing SMS messages is a clear red flag. And that's what we see, because the way you can detect those, you can do it with intelligence-based detection when you know the signatures and so on, but that only works once that malware is known. Also, there is, permission that have been requested. That's always something to have on the lookout. But I think for us, what we also see working very well is behavior-based detection, because that is technically a 0-day. So even if the malware is not known, when we identify a fraudulent behavior by the type of activity that they are performed, the way they are performed on a device, when we can see is not the original user, the way they touch the screen, the way they move is wrong on the device, that really help us to stop even the latest malware that I might have been targeting there. So I think we have our next poll now coming regarding rat detection. So if we could run that poll, I believe the what we were asking, yes, talking about the fraudster being prolific. How many victims can a single threat actor reach? And I think on this, Dima, you referred to an existing case, like a recent case.
Yep.
And can you tell us a bit more about the case without telling us the number, just to see if the audience guessed right? What can you tell us about that an instance?
Yeah, just a quick example. An international organized crime group that contacted victims by telephone or via the internet, and they presented themselves as brokers of online trading platforms dealing in cryptocurrencies, and they convinced victims to make an investment. It's called like investment fraud. In addition, to fraudulent offers, they installed the remote access programs and allowed them illegally have access to the victims' computers and steal the banking credential, card data, cryptocurrency, wallet access information, etc. And it's believed, we not finished the poll. Yeah.
Let's see the result while you finish explaining.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Okay. What was the number in that case?
I believe that more than 30,000 people and at least 71 different countries has fallen victims of just one criminal network, criminal group.
Yeah. Okay. So better that way. Better that we are aware of how high they are. We better overestimate the fraudster than underestimate them. Okay. So if we close the pool.
So basically, as you can see, different schemes are running here, right? And while we are talking about the remote access tools that are being used, even the vendors of such remote access tools asking the customers basically to be aware of the social engineering attacks, to avoid the scam, basically. You could see that how many basically losses are involved in this potential schemes. But basically the financial institutions should not rely on customers, because as we know, they will not read the terms and conditions. They will just give away the permissions to their phone while installing the Trojans. And at the same way, wow, sorry, my cat just dropped. So basically, as we can see, we cannot rely on customers who are negligent to their own personal data. And basically, the financial institutions should take care of these cases basically beforehand, right? So talking about, let's say, the fraudulent schemes that they operate, we can basically divide it into the pieces. Let's say into the chain of actions that the fraudster tries to reach, right? So it starts with reconnaissance, then basically development of the tools, or basically obtaining such kind of tools, as we talked before, the phishing kits, the malware, basically as well the remote access tool, which costs nothing because it's the open source that you can use anywhere. And just by having this kind of view over what are the intended goals of these fraudsters, you can basically take piece by piece every scheme and basically find gaps, for example, that you have in your own assessment of the customer, let's say, relations, right? And so if we take the example of the rat, yeah, here it is, Julian.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I was about to ask you to tell us. How does it look for real case?
Exactly. So as you can see, basically the pieces or steps that the fraudster should go through is at first to obtain some information about the victim, or even without it, they can start like just bombing them with the SMS messages, for example, and so on. And then they should create the mule accounts to basically where should they move the money in case if they reach the targeted goal, let's say. So just by having the little piece of the information about the victim, his first, last names, maybe the number of the credit card that was obtained for the phishing, or even leaked and then bought for nothing on a dark web forum, then basically they can start performing the phishing attacks, asking to install the remote access tools, and basically to continue with all the steps up until withdrawing the money, or basically moving them to the controlled account to then cash it out later. So by having this view over the, let's say, the full chain, you need to understand that these schemes can be stopped and should be stopped on the earliest stages possible, right? So before the monetization part started, before basically the customer is under attack of the fraudster who is on a call with him right now. And so basically, if we talk about the trends and patterns of the use of such scheme, we also have the pretty nice statistics regarding that. So Dmitry, could you please elaborate more on that?
Yeah, sure. This is statistic for the last 6 months. And the graph shows that number of sessions with the remote access tools increased significantly. And as you can see on the graph, despite the fact that there are small fluctuation, the number of sessions is still growing. And if you compare with the beginning of the year, the peak value on the graph is almost 70% higher compared to the January.
Wow. And so we see there the clear cut between web, iOS, and Android. And so why such a gap?
Because to install remote access tools on mobile device, and mobile device is very essential tool for our everyday life. And as you can see, almost 75% are Android devices. And you always have your smartphone with you. And when fraudster call you or send you a message, the scheme can quickly be executed instead of going to the desktop and etc.
So we should point out, does this represent a sign that iOS is safer, or it's just the fact that there's so much more Android devices on the market because they're obviously the more affordable type of device compared to some iPhones that fetch, in the high $1,000 these days? Is that a key indicator here, or the key indicator is the actual operating system?
I would say that it's kind of combination of both. First of all, yeah, we see that there are much more varieties of different Android devices, and they across different countries and more affordable. Exactly, and it's just easier to convince and to install remote access tools on the Android device.
Okay, I see. Well, so with that, Andrew, what can you tell us about how this works when people are running this on Android devices?
Yeah, of course, it's easy to understand like how the scheme works, but it's also important to see this hands-on, let's say. So I have the emulator of the Android device. It's easier to create. So I will be calling and let's say simulating the call from a fraudster to this phone. So imagine you're going out, you have a call incoming to your phone, basically that tells you that, hey, we see the suspicious transaction on your side, please, yeah, go to your banking account, log in there, you need to move the money to the really safe safe and secured, let's say, account number. So make this transaction. Basically, what they try to do is abuse the trustworthiness of the victims, and basically use this rushing approach, let's say, to speed up the process, or to install the remote access tool, as in this example, for instance. So just by having this remote access tool installed, the fraudster will need just to run the TeamViewer, just ask for the number of where he should connect to, and then basically initiate this activity. So by having this remote access to the phone, it's really easy to manipulate with the customer about telling him where he should go to, where he should move the money to, for example, and basically have almost the full control when you have the stressed out victim, when you have all the tools being used against him and all the pressure that he feels. Then you can make him basically moves the money to the controlled account of yours. From the other side of this scene, basically, you can track all of this activity. So here is the example of the fraud protection solution that we have, and that shows the statistics about any potential threats, for example, coming from the end user devices. And so just by quick glance and investigation around the case, you could see that there is the session of the victim with a high scoring, that something happened there. While looking into the session, you could see that the remote access tool was detected. You can see basically whether the device was rooted or emulated as well, as in my example. So you could see the active call was happening there without even any personal data or the number, because the number might be spoofed by the fraudster, which is also regularly used. So imagine that you have this visibility and your analyst can basically make more accurate decision. So here was one of the example of using the remote access tool, but what the fraudster will do is basically, or can do, use his own device. So on the background, I basically have another Android device that I'm trying to connect to as well. So this device is in my hands, and basically then I can try to log into the customer banking account, basically. So here it is. Yeah, I will not close the connection, not this and not this button. So basically, having this device connected to me, I just wanted to show you how I will use the same credentials, let's say, of the customer that I already exfiltrated. I'm still on the call with him, so I can ask him for the SMS OTP to confirm the transaction or confirm the sign-in, and basically then perform another transfer of the money, which looks actually really easy to do. Of course, within all this, let's say, technologies that we have, the most vulnerable one is the person basically behind the device itself. And that's why it's actually really important to keep track on any suspicious activity that is happening there. So before the customer made this, let's say, move or action of moving the money. So here we can see that basically to the same account, there was the new device connected and basically logged in. And for us, it's the new untrusted device that we haven't seen before. And judging by the previous session, when we saw the remote access tool, the active call, we can confirm that this was the account takeover case. And if we investigate it further, we will see basically the first device that was connected with this account. And if we extend the graph itself, we will see that there is another device with another fingerprint, basically, that is connected to the same account of the customer. And so the tool should basically provide you the all-in-one window where you can investigate this case, whether it was the Motorola or emulated device, and what were the events that were triggered during and across the session of the customer to perform the more accurate decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
sorry, I was about to say, I must say that I like this ability to see not only the data, but kind of also this visual that allow you to escalate the case to someone, maybe internally, when even if they're not a fraud analyst, they can see the connection between the device and the accounts here quite easily and see that clearly something is wrong.
Exactly. But actually, to summarize, to sum it up, you need to track these points of the information. So if you are looking for the activity of the customer, you need to understand whether there was the active call, for example. If we go, if there was any call to a victim before he logs into the banking account, because the long calls, for example, might be a good indicator that there is something suspicious going on, for example. Whether there was in the sign in to the banking account from the new device or from the legitimate one, if it was coming from the legitimate device, whether there were any remote access active on a device itself, maybe there was an active call at the same time. And as you can see, you can also basically decide if the long or abnormal call duration might be also the additional point to basically conclude that there was an attack and that you need to take care of it, basically. So
I see. So Dima, when it comes to that, we mentioned geolocation earlier, and I presume it's a tool which is used as well to try to assess the threat. Tell us about this. What are we looking at here?
Let me go back to the story that I told at the start of our talk, that activity from well-known fraudulent device is higher than any other in high-risk sessions. And the current slide, it shows a heat map about this activity from such kind of devices within the European Union. And as you can see, almost 50% of the devices are active within France and 25% in Germany, and Netherlands, Greece, and Poland are ranked third, first, and fifth, respectively. And geolocation activity within the country doesn't mean that the fraudster commits fraud specifically in that country. Most often, fraudsters work in different regions within EU or even worldwide. For example, a fraudulent device from France can be used to access the victim accounts from Greece during social engineering attacks, or used in money mule network and vice versa. Let me just go back to the story I told about one crime group. Remember, 71 different countries have fallen victim to the criminal network.
And here comes basically the analysis of the known fraudulent device, right? So when we are talking about this distributed network of the fraudsters as a business that perform the same fraud over any other bank, basically we should consider that the financial institutions also should take care of the signs if this device was seen in the fraudulent activity before. So on this graph, for example, you can see the global device ID that is distributed across 3 different banking services, so like represented by different colors. So as you know, this data might be anonymously and anonymized provided to the financial institutions that basically this device previously was seen in one of the fraudulent schemes across the world that were protected with the fraud protection solution, and you need to take care of it. So basically you need to take care of it before the actual fraud has happened. So you can add his device into the watch list, for example, to hold the transactions in case if it was seen there. You need to check maybe or challenge his identities, because it might be also forged, and that's why it's also important to have the identity verification on your side. And the most important basically is that you need to take actions in real time almost, because the longer you wait, the more chances that the actual scheme will take place and will be executed successfully from the already known fraudulent device here.
Yes, absolutely. And it goes back to what we mentioned earlier. Part of the application of our fraud matrix is that, as you mentioned earlier, Andrew, we break down the schemes in different categories, and then we identify the most common vulnerabilities. For example, if you are looking in your organization that you have a lot of social engineering attacks, some employee fraud, you might see that the common denominator between those the type of fraud you are facing have the same denominator. So in this case, let's say mule account is something that comes in all of the scheme that you have been victim of. And so what you can then use the matrix is to set your priorities. To say, okay, so what are the effective countermeasures against mule account? Well, monitoring multi-accounting is one. Payment anomaly detection and non-mule account sources. So then the matrix will tell you, okay, but so what capabilities do I need? And user session monitoring is one of them, device fingerprinting also. And that is quite surprising. I might actually run a poll on that as well in a second. And then we'll also give you the sort of rules that you had. So once I have these tools in place, what are the things that I'm monitoring? So in this instance, the number of accounts per device that have been reached. So if you think about this, mule account, the people who want to access that network of account, they will have to have control of it. And so that you can detect it by seeing, using the technology we talked about today, see if multiple accounts have been managed centrally by one device. That would be a strong indicator that these accounts might be manipulated. And of course, you need some local intelligence with this. If you are in some countries, it might be quite usual for a family to share a device, when in other countries, people have a mobile phone way before they can have a bank account. And so in this scenario, if we're looking at the application of this, we can see here, that's an example of mule accounts network. And we can see that 70 user accounts were manipulated with less than 30 devices. But you can see in the middle is quite one device that was used to control quite a large number of accounts, and that should be enough to raise all sorts of red flags in your organization. So with that would be the last poll of the call that we can run and see exactly, like, as the audience, if anyone has already thought of using session monitoring to detect mule account in the way that we just described, because it's very powerful. Dima, Andrew, do you have any experience of working with customers stopping mule accounts this way while we wait for the result of the poll, maybe?
Yeah, of course. So basically, we have the experience of, let's say, integrating the solution into the, let's say, the monitoring or anti-fraud orchestration platforms. So at the time they see that there is the remote access tool being used actively, then the bank basically takes action of holding the account and basically asking them to connect with the technical specialist. So from one of the case, they basically prevented the loss of 70,000 euros from one of the banking accounts of the customer, just with the help of the detection of such remote access tools, the social engineering attacks, and other, let's say, techniques that were used there. And so just looking at how it might be used, and that it can be also automated to avoid, let's say, the human reaction here, it's just getting more clear that the more institutions should take care of their, let's say, end users before the actual fraud has happened, and that they can't rely just purely on the, let's say, victims' awareness. And it's not enough just to pop up some articles like be careful of the social or social engineering attacks, of the scam using the remote access tools, or be aware of the phishing sites, because sometimes the people will not actually be into that. So you need also to have something to back you up. And usually it is the session anti-fraud solutions that can actually expose the attack before it actually reached its intended goal.
Yeah, I see. Let's see the result. Okay, that's quite good. That's very good. It's quite often we don't get as good as a result as that. I'm very happy with 60%. Often I think people kind of look at very advanced solution to finish that, like dedicated mule account detection from AML systems and so on. That can be quite pricey, but this is definitely a great step for that. So with that, this concludes our for the entire day. I mean, we can check if there is any question from the audience that we might have received in the chat. Just gonna leave to see if there is anything that we've been asked.
Of course.
I want to thank
maybe
you.
we have the pretty fast attendees, for example, like that found us on the LinkedIn. So yeah, you can always send us your questions directly as well. We will be really happy to answer those if you are, let's say, shy from the webinar and that it will be recorded and so on. But yeah, all types of questions, yeah, feel free to ask them so we could have, like, let's say, the more interesting discussion as well. So
let's see with Adriana if we have any question that were put into the chat. Okay, it looks like we have no questions. So it's always either the presentation was absolutely spectacular and we covered everything, or it was terrible. I hope it was the first. Thank you all very much for joining us this morning. I hope this was useful, and we will see you in another 3 months for an update on the fraud trend in Europe, where we will continue to monitor the data, show you how this evolves, and what are the latest schemes that have been used, and hopefully give you some countermeasures around it. Thank you very much, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
thank you all. Have a great day. Take care.
Bye.